There's a learning method so powerful that samurai students could master deadly techniques just by watching. And today, you'll discover why most people never learn to truly see. Have you ever wondered how a samurai student could watch his master perform a sword technique once and then execute it perfectly? How ancient warriors learned complex fighting systems without lengthy explanations or step-by-step instructions? How they mastered skills in months that took others years? The answer has nothing to do with talent. It has to do with something they called Mitori Geiko, the practice of stealing technique through observation. And when you understand how this system works, you'll never struggle to learn anything again. But there's a catch. This method will require you to kill the part of yourself that thinks learning happens through explanation. Most people today are deaf and blind when it comes to real learning, and that's precisely why they stay mediocre forever. Before I show you exactly how this ancient learning system works, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss future content. Also, comment below what skill you're trying to master right now. I read every comment and it helps me create better content for you. Thank you very much for your attention. Back to the video. There was a young man named Kenji in 16th century Japan, Edo period. He had one dream that consumed every waking moment: to become a swordsman. Not just any swordsman, but a master of the blade like the legendary warriors he'd heard about in stories. At 15 years old, Kenji finally convinced a local sensei to accept him as a student at his dojo. He was ecstatic. He imagined the sensei would teach him secret techniques, explain the philosophy of combat, break down each movement into digestible lessons. He was completely wrong. On his first day at the dojo, Kenji arrived early, eager and ready to learn. The sensei was already there, practicing alone in the center of the training hall. Kenji watched as his teacher moved through a series of cuts and strikes, each motion flowing into the next like water. It was beautiful, mesmerizing, perfect. When the sensei finished, he looked at Kenji and said 3 words that changed everything. "Now you do it." Kenji stood frozen. "But sensei, you didn't explain anything." "What was that technique? How do I position my feet? Where do I place my hands? How do I?" The sensei raised his hand, cutting him off. "I showed you. That is the explanation. If you cannot see, you cannot learn." For the next 6 months, this was Kenji's entire education. The sensei would demonstrate a technique once, maybe twice. Then Kenji would attempt to replicate it. No verbal instructions, no corrections, no explanations, just watching and doing. At first, Kenji was terrible. His movements were clumsy, his timing was off, his form was all wrong. But something strange began to happen around the 3rd month. He started to see things he couldn't see before. The way the sensei's hips rotated before a strike, the subtle shift of weight from one foot to the other, the exact moment when the breath synchronized with the movement. Details that had been invisible suddenly became crystal clear. By the 6th month, other students from different dojos would visit to train. They had been studying for years, receiving detailed explanations from their teachers, breaking down every technique into components, understanding the theory behind each movement. But when they sparred with Kenji, they lost. Not because Kenji was stronger or faster, but because his body understood in a way their minds never could. His teacher had taught him something far more valuable than techniques. He had taught him how to see. This is the power of Mitori Geiko, and it goes against everything you've been taught about learning. In modern education, we're obsessed with explanation. We want everything broken down, analyzed, verbalized. We want to understand before we do. We want the teacher to tell us exactly what to do, how to do it, why it works. We think this is learning, but it's actually the exact opposite. True learning doesn't happen in your thinking mind. It happens in your body, in your awareness, in that part of you that knows without words. The samurai understood this centuries ago. They called it Shin, the mind that sees without thinking. Here's what most people don't understand about Mitori Geiko. It's not just watching, it's a specific type of observation that requires you to shut down your analytical mind and open up something deeper. When you watch your sensei demonstrate a technique, your brain wants to do 3 things immediately. First, it wants to categorize what it's seeing. Oh, that's a downward strike. I've seen something like this before. Second, it wants to verbalize the movement. He's stepping forward with his left foot, then rotating his hips, then bringing the sword down at a 45-degree angle. Third, it wants to judge. That looks hard. I don't think I can do that. Maybe I should ask for an easier version. All 3 of these mental processes kill learning. Why? because they create a barrier between what you're seeing and what your body needs to absorb. Let me explain how samurai students actually practiced Mitori Geiko, and then you'll understand why it's so effective. When a sensei demonstrated a technique, the student wouldn't think about it at all. Instead, they would do something that sounds almost mystical but is actually neuroscience. They would mentally rehearse the movement while watching. Not think about it, rehearse it. There's a massive difference. When you watch someone perform a physical skill and you imagine yourself doing it, your brain fires the exact same neural pathways as if you were actually doing it. Scientists call this mirror neuron activation. The samurai didn't know the science, but they knew the practice worked. So while the sensei moved, the student's body would be moving internally, feeling the weight shift, sensing the hip rotation, experiencing the timing, all without moving a muscle externally. This is why samurai students could watch a technique once and replicate it immediately. Their bodies had already done it 100 times in the space between seeing and doing. But here's where it gets deeper. Mitori Geiko wasn't just about learning techniques. It was about developing what the Japanese call the eye. This is the ability to see the invisible. Every martial art has layers. On the surface, you see the gross movements, the big obvious stuff. Arm goes up, leg goes forward, body turns. Anyone can see this level, but beneath the surface are the subtle movements that separate masters from beginners. The micro adjustments of balance, the precise timing of breath, the imperceptible tension and release of specific muscle groups. These invisible elements are what actually make a technique work, and they can only be learned through observation, never through explanation. There's a famous story about Miyamoto Musashi, perhaps the greatest swordsman in Japanese history. A student once asked him, "Master, what is the secret to your technique?" Musashi demonstrated a strike. The student watched carefully and said, "I see, so you rotate your hips first, then bring the sword down." Musashi shook his head. "If you're seeing my hips rotate, you're already blind." What Musashi meant was that by the time you notice the obvious movements, you've missed what actually matters. The real technique happens in the moments before the movement, in the intention, in the way the mind and body unite before any visible action occurs. This is what separates watching from truly seeing. Most people watch techniques like they watch television, passively taking in information. Samurai students watched like their lives depended on it, because in actual combat, they did. They watched with their entire being, not just their eyes, but their body, their breath, their intuition. They watched until they could feel the movement in their own muscles, until they could sense the intention behind each action, until the technique lived inside them before they ever attempted to do it physically. Now, let me give you the practical framework for how to apply Mitori Geiko to any skill you're trying to learn. This works for martial arts, obviously, but also for music, art, sports, public speaking, anything that involves physical performance or embodied skill. Here's how you do it. First, find someone who already masters what you want to learn. Not someone who's good, someone who's truly excellent. In the samurai tradition, you don't learn from someone just a few steps ahead of you. You learn from someone who has completely internalized the skill. Why? Because masters move differently. Their technique has been refined over thousands of hours. All the unnecessary movements have been stripped away. Only the essential remains. When you watch a master, you're watching the purest expression of the skill. When you watch a beginner or intermediate, you're watching someone who still carries inefficiencies and bad habits. You'll absorb those too. Second, watch in silence. This is critical. Do not ask questions. Do not request explanations. Just watch. Your thinking mind will hate this. It will scream at you, ask how to do that. Ask what he's thinking. Ask for the steps. Ignore it completely. The moment you start asking questions, you activate your analytical mind, and your analytical mind is the worst teacher for physical skills. It's too slow, it overthinks. It breaks things into pieces that don't naturally exist. Your body learns faster when your mind shuts up. Third, watch with the intention to steal. This is the real meaning of Mitori Geiko. Mitori means to take by watching and Geiko means practice. You're not a spectator, you're a thief, you're stealing the technique with your eyes. This mindset shift is everything. When you watch as a spectator, you're passive. When you watch as a thief, you're active, focused, hungry. You're looking for every detail you can grab and make your own. Fourth, mentally rehearse while you watch. This is where the real magic happens. As you watch the master perform, imagine yourself performing. Feel it in your body, don't think about it, feel it. When the master shifts weight, feel your weight shifting. When the master breathes, breathe with them. When the master strikes, feel the strike in your own muscles. You're creating a neural pathway before you physically move. This is why some samurai students could watch a technique and perform it immediately. They'd already done it dozens of times internally. Fifth, replicate without hesitation. The moment the demonstration ends, do it. Don't think, don't plan, don't analyze, just move. Your first attempt will be terrible. That's not just okay, it's necessary. The gap between what you saw and what you can do shows you exactly what you need to work on. But here's the key, you don't work on it by thinking. You work on it by watching again and trying again. The cycle of observe, feel, do, observe, feel, do, repeated endlessly until your body understands. Now, I need to tell you about the biggest obstacle you'll face when trying to apply Mitori Geiko. It's not lack of talent or poor instruction. It's your ego. Your ego has 1,000 ways to sabotage your learning, and it will use all of them. When you watch someone who's better than you, your ego wants to protect itself. So it says things like, sure, but I do it differently. Or that's fine for them, but my style is more natural. Or I already know this. I've seen it before. Every one of these thoughts is a prison. They prevent you from truly seeing because you're filtering everything through your existing beliefs and patterns. There's a Zen concept called Shoshin, beginner's mind. It means approaching every situation as if you know nothing, even if you're experienced. This is the opposite of what most people do. Most people, the more they learn, the more they think they know. Their cup gets fuller and fuller until nothing new can fit. The samurai student kept their cup empty. They approached every training session as if they'd never picked up a sword before. This allowed them to see things they would have missed if they thought they already knew. Let me share something that happened to Kenji in his second year of training. By this time, he'd been practicing Mitori Geiko consistently. He'd become quite skilled, winning matches against students from other schools. His technique was clean, his timing was good. He felt confident. One day, a new student joined the dojo, a complete beginner. The sensei asked Kenji to help demonstrate a basic technique for the new student. As Kenji performed the movement he'd done 1,000 times, the sensei stopped him. "Watch," the sensei said. Then he performed the exact same basic technique Kenji had just done. To Kenji's eyes, it looked identical to what he'd done. But the sensei asked, "Do you see the difference?" Kenji looked carefully. He couldn't see any difference. They were doing the same movement. The sensei smiled. "You've stopped seeing. You think you know this technique, so you've stopped watching. Watch again, but this time forget everything you know." Kenji tried to empty his mind. He watched as the sensei performed the movement again, slowly this time. And suddenly, he saw it. A tiny rotation of the shoulder that happened a fraction of a second before the arm moved. Something so subtle he'd missed it completely, even though he'd watched his sensei do this technique hundreds of times. That moment taught Kenji something crucial. Mitori Geiko is not just for beginners, it's for life. The deeper you go into any skill, the more there is to see. Masters never stop watching because they understand that true mastery is infinite. There's always another layer, another detail, another invisible element waiting to be discovered. This is why traditional dojos had a practice where even senior students would sit on the side during class and just watch. They weren't injured, they weren't resting. They were practicing Mitori Geiko because they understood that sometimes you learn more from watching than from doing. Here's something modern education gets completely wrong. We think learning is linear. We think you start with simple things, master those, then move to complex things. We think you need to understand the theory before you can do the practice. The samurai way is completely opposite. You start by trying to copy perfection, even if you're nowhere close to being able to do it. You watch masters, not beginners. You attempt advanced techniques on day one, not after you've mastered the basics. Why? Because your body needs to know where it's going. If you only practice beginner techniques, you'll develop beginner patterns. But if you watch mastery from day one, your body begins to understand the destination. It might take years to get there, but at least you're aiming at the right target. A neuroscientist at Stanford University, who has been studying motor learning for 17 years, discovered something remarkable. When students observe expert performance before attempting a skill themselves, they learn significantly faster than students who receive step-by-step instruction. Why? Because observation activates the brain's internal simulation system. You're essentially downloading the neural pattern of the skill before you physically attempt it. This is exactly what the samurai knew centuries ago. They didn't have the science, but they had the results. Now let me tell you what happened to Kenji after 5 years of training under his sensei. He had become a skilled swordsman, respected in his region, but he still felt something was missing. One day he asked his sensei, "Master, I can perform the techniques well now, but I still don't feel like I truly understand." The sensei replied, "Good. The day you think you understand is the day you stop learning. But I want to teach you something now. For 5 years you've been learning to see outwardly. Now it's time to learn to see inwardly." The sensei explained that Mitori Geiko has 2 directions. First, you watch others to learn. This is external observation. But once you've developed your eye, you must turn that same quality of observation toward yourself. You must watch your own movements with the same clarity you watch your teacher. This is called Naikan, internal observation. When you practice, you're not just doing the technique, you're simultaneously observing yourself doing the technique, not thinking about it, observing it. Feeling where you're tight, where you're flowing, where you're forcing, where you're natural. This internal observation is what allows you to self-correct without needing a teacher to point out every mistake. The sensei told Kenji, a true master is someone who has become their own sensei. They watch themselves practice as if they're watching a stranger. They see their own flaws without judgment. They notice their own progress without pride. This is the final stage of Mitori Geiko, when the observer and the observed become one. This is the level most people never reach because it requires something painful. It requires you to see yourself clearly, without the filters of ego, without the stories you tell yourself about who you are and what you're capable of. It requires brutal honesty, but this is also where real mastery lives. Let me give you the complete practice now. If you want to learn any skill the samurai way, here's exactly what you do. Choose your master, find someone who has truly mastered what you want to learn, not someone famous, someone skilled. Watch them obsessively. Go to their classes, watch their videos, study their movements. Don't just watch casually, watch like a thief, you're stealing their technique. Watch in silence. Do not ask questions for at least the first 30 hours of observation. Let your eyes and body learn before. Your mind interferes, feel while you watch. As they move, imagine yourself moving. Feel it in your muscles, your bones, your breath. Create the neural pathway before you physically move. Replicate immediately. The moment you finish watching, try to do it. Don't think, just move. Your body will fail, that's fine. The failure shows you what to watch for next time. Return to observation. Watch again, see what you missed. Watch again, see deeper. Watch again, see the invisible. Practice and observe yourself. As you practice, watch your own movement with the same quality of attention you gave to your teacher. See without judgment, just notice. Repeat this cycle for years. Not months, years. This is not a quick fix. This is a complete reprogramming of how you learn. There's one final element of Mitori Geiko I need to share with you. It's the most important part, but also the hardest to explain. The samurai believed that when you watch someone with complete attention, something beyond technique gets transmitted. They called it Kai, the life energy of the master. Modern people hear this and think it's mysticism, but there's actually a scientific basis for it. When you observe someone performing at a high level, you're not just seeing their movements. You're picking up on their state of mind, their emotional tone, their level of presence. Mirror neurons don't just copy movements. They copy the entire embodied state of the person you're watching. This is why it matters who you watch. If you watch someone who's tense, you'll absorb tension. If you watch someone who's hesitant, you'll absorb hesitation. But if you watch someone who's completely present, flowing, unified in mind and body, you'll absorb that too. The samurai were very careful about who their students watched. They didn't let beginners watch mediocre practitioners because they didn't want bad patterns to be absorbed. You become what you repeatedly observe. This is not metaphorical. It's neurological. 10 years after beginning his training, Kenji had become a sensei himself. He now taught students the same way he was taught, through observation, through silence, through Mitori Geiko. One day, a new student asked him, "Sensei, why don't you explain the techniques? Wouldn't it be faster if you just told us what to do?" Kenji smiled because he'd asked his own sensei the exact same question years ago. He replied, "I could tell you, but words would give you knowledge. I want to give you something deeper. I want to give you understanding that lives in your body, not just your head. Watch me, steal from me, make it yours. This is the way." The student looked confused, but Kenji knew that confusion was the beginning of real learning. When you're comfortable, you're not growing. When you're confused, your mind is opening. The student would eventually understand, just as Kenji had. Or the student would quit, choosing the easier path of explicit instruction and surface-level learning. Either way, the way of Mitori Geiko would remain, waiting for those rare individuals who understood that true mastery cannot be taught. It can only be stolen through observation. If this video changed how you think about learning, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss future content that will transform your approach to mastery. Tell me in the comments what skill you're going to apply Mitori Geiko to. What master will you watch? What technique will you steal? Remember, learning doesn't happen through explanation. It happens through observation. The samurai proved this for centuries. Now it's your turn to prove it in your own life. If you've made it this far, thank you very much for your attention. You're one of the few who are willing to learn the hard way, which is the only way that leads to true mastery. Until the next video, keep your eyes open, your mind quiet, and your body ready to steal.